Hello and welcome to What's in Your Audit, a guide to auditing Drupal sites. I've set up a Twitter hashtag, so if you have any questions or want to get in touch on this subject afterwards, feel free to tweet at me, What's in Your Audit. I tried to make this session as inclusive as possible, so it's listed as intermediate, but we'll be covering a range of skill levels. Be warned, there is some tech speak in this, but it varies. So it also covers good modules to install on your site, and while we're talking about auditing sites, you can certainly apply this knowledge to active site builds as well. Also, we're not focusing on Drupal 8, but certainly could extend some of these ideas to that. So who am I? My name is John Brandenburg. I am a senior developer at Forum 1, and you may have seen me in such Drupal Association featured tweets as the one from last month's newsletter. This is me with my son, who just turned 1 yesterday, wearing my Drupal hat I got for becoming an individual supporting member. So if you don't support the Drupal Association yet, I highly encourage you to. You get a really cool badge on your Drupal.org profile. I'm also a member of the Forum 1 support team, so we maintain a lot of existing sites that we've built over time. So a lot of it is dealing with legacy code that can be challenging. And so if you don't recognize Jon Snow here, he's been condemned to watching the walls, which is akin to the experience of the maintenance team member. And I've seen a lot of different approaches in my experience on the maintenance team to building Drupal sites, and I'm occasionally asked to perform audits on Drupal sites, so I sort of developed this process here that I'm sharing with all of you. So why audit? Well, one, we want to be sure we come into supporting a site with some base of knowledge, but this primarily means cataloging technical debt. Now, this is a term that was coined in the early 90s by a fellow named Ward Cunningham while working on some financial software or another. And the metaphor is centered around taking out a loan, right? Here is, there's a video here. I'm going to post these slides online later so you can watch this at your leisure. There's also some links to him explaining the metaphor and the original paper where he coined the term. But essentially in development, we can take out this loan where we can perform development more rapidly and get things done quickly. But this does come at a cost, and that cost is the interest we pay in our own time. An approach that wasn't perhaps the most wise to use can make it more difficult to maintain a site. And it's not like we have, time tracking codes where we actually track this. This can be very opaque to us. We don't have a good list of what technical debt is always costing us. So we want to be sure we approach development in the best practice manner when we can, go back and pay down this technical debt when we can. So the loan metaphor works well in this area. And here's a little illustration of what that's like. These guys are too busy. We often do get caught up in our day-to-day work to try and pay down the debt. So replacing these square wheels with some more efficient ones might be not within our scope of vision. And it's hard to convince product owners that we need to pay down this debt, because if something's working fine as is, then why should we invest in the time to change it? So auditing a site in the first place is a step in the right direction for sure. On the flip side, I felt compelled to include this XKCD comic. The last strip there says, when asked to pass the salt, I know I'm developing a system to pass arbitrary condiments. It'll save time in the long run. So, this can be taken to an extreme level, and there's a point where things work good enough for us. I wanted to include another link to an article here that I read just this past week. Got it off of Y Combinator News, which is discussing the first 100 years of web development. A lot of these technologies have been around for close to 50 years now, so we're at the halfway mark at the point. So we don't need to fix the world with software. There is a point where things are good enough. So let's get into the meat of this presentation. When I first set out, I didn't want to just chime off a list of best practices, but we're talking about auditing sites. We're talking about what are the good ideas and maybe not so good ideas for this. So here it is. A few warnings. Some of these items might be subject to opinion. You can certainly disagree with that opinion, and we can discuss that after the presentation, or tweet at me. I'll be at the Forum 1 booth. So your mileage may vary, basically. But these are what I've learned throughout my career in Drupal, drawing on the knowledge of my professional colleagues at Forum 1. I've developed this document. It's just a spreadsheet of items you can check out on a site. I've tweeted the link to this already. I actually did this presentation, a version of this presentation, at the Drupal Northern Virginia meetup last month. So I've already tweeted this link, and also a link to these slides, although it's an older version of the slides, so I'll be posting the updated version later this evening. So how to use this document? You generally want to take 3 passes. Now you can jump back and forth, sure, but take 3 passes. First, you want to assess a site, going down the list. Build a mental model of it, just for the analysis. You don't want to take action right away, because we want to build our mental models of the site, and then we make a recommendation. And then with any recommendations, we want some sort of attachment to a cost. So generally at Forum 1, we estimate as story points. This is under the agile process. A story point generally is a day's worth of work, which is easier to estimate, because saying something might take 2.5 hours and seems just downright silly when we talk about how well we can estimate in tech. And this might be a good point to talk with your client, that estimates are just estimates. They're not guarantees that work is going to take X number of hours. And what you'll need, this may not be surprising to any of you, of course, access to the code, copy of the database. You want to be able to stand up the site locally. Admin accounts to the actual staging or production site. This is important because you want to gain access to these reports page that tells you what is actually running in the production environment. Because I can stand up something locally or in a virtual machine, but it's not going to match production, certainly. It can be done without it, but it's not going to be complete. Let's see. So general best practices is kind of where I've stuck items that don't totally fit in a single area, but what you're going to be able to get from your biggest quick wins are using these 2 modules. Now, one's an actual Drupal module you can install on your site. The other one is like a Drush extension, for lack of a better term. And the production check will go through and check your site for what best practices are in place, or what are you missing. So you see here an example. This is just a basic Drupal site I've installed. Where's my mouse? With the prod check report here. Some of these are these are all the default settings. I just stood up this site a couple hours ago. So you see it's calling out a number of issues here just with default settings. So prod check, we'll definitely check for more items, giving a more complex installation, but it's a very helpful and useful tool to have running and use in an audit to help you call out these single things. The other project to call out here is the site audit module or project. This is, like I said, a Drush extension, and you can have it generate a report that looks similar to this, calls out a number of items, and I haven't sat down and built out what one calls out that the other doesn't, but reaching out to as many tools that we can is certainly a good idea. So well, I wanted to caveat this slide a little bit. So another thing we do quite often in Drupal is modify code, modify contrib projects. The secure pages module actually requires you to patch core. We're altering core, and we hear so much about how we're not supposed to change core. But if you want to use the secure pages module, which can allow you to redirect HTTPS to have a more secure site, you need to patch core, and that's just the state of Drupal 7. Hacked will not protect your site from being hacked, nor will it hack your site. Just that's on the module page, so apparently some people thought it might do that. And it's important to gain a census or a list of what modules have been altered, because when it comes to update time, when we update modules, mainly for security updates, a patched module is much more difficult to update than an unpatched one, because we need to, one, identify that this module has indeed been altered from its original release. We need to determine if that module or that patch is still relevant. Maybe the patch has been pulled into the new release, and so it's no longer necessary. Or maybe it hasn't. You have to reapply that patch when it becomes time to update that module. So there is a robust ecosystem to patching Drupal modules. It happens all the time. Either it's a bug, a security issue, or maybe your use case just isn't supported by this module. And a lot of people, these are all open source projects, so they're putting in their own time to create new functionality or fix these bugs. Like you're here for the last session, the COD module or the COD distribution. They're really active and really inviting people to come in and participate by either writing documentation or reporting bugs. So there are a lot of guidelines to how to contribute patches. Generally, this is how I like to arrange my patches in a project adjacent to the Drupal root. If we're talking about some sort of Git repository or a subversion, mostly Git nowadays. And there's some specific naming conventions. So, having the name of the project in the patch file is really helpful for knowing which projects you need to patch, rather than going through and pulling up issue after issue and trying to determine what's actually been patched in your project. And if you do have any custom code in your site, be sure it follows the coding standards for Drupal. There's quite a bit outlined in this link here, from just minor spacing to everything. And you don't need to memorize things. There's actually a project, the coder module, that will call these items out for you and tell you what you need to fix. And it's really easy to use. So there's really not any excuse to do that. Also, custom code or any code, module code, needs to follow good practices. But using the API, there are a lot of APIs in Drupal. That's ways our code interacts with the code within Drupal. I think a lot of new Drupal developers might try to interact with a views object like this, where they're descending through the array of depth here. This example is changing the value of an exposed filter, a date filter. There are more straightforward and easier to read methods to alter code. And documentation is important too. It exists, is correct, and not many people might understand this aspect or this point, but it focuses more on the why code exists, not what it does. So yeah, I can read code, eventually figure out what it does, but that doesn't help me understand why is it there in the first place. Why are we implementing this hook? That's what I find to be much more helpful documentation than step-by-step of what it's doing. And if this section was the random items, this is the random of the random, I guess. These other tidbits, usage of the session super variable, super global variable on a Drupal site. This is where user session data is stored, not surprisingly. You might not realize this, but if you use this variable anywhere, just add information to it, that user automatically has a session. That means they cannot be served a cached page until that session expires. This can greatly hurt the performance of your site, especially if a lot of users are getting these new sessions because you're maybe using some form of poor man's analytics or one way or another of where you want to store this user data. So, do yourself a favor, use cookies, or, be sure that, this isn't used for anonymous users in general. Heavy use of includes, maybe no more than a dozen. It's generally what I think is a fingerprint of a more general PHP developer than a Drupal developer. Going back to the API, use the API slide. There are APIs for performing a lot of these tasks in Drupal. So generally avoid a lot of just direct includes in Drupal when you can. Version control, is it in use? I love using Git. I believe that if any code is running in any sort of production instance, it should be in version control. No excuse, no exceptions. And the location of the web root in the version control system. These days, we're adding a lot of more DevOpsy tools to a site. You have your grunt files, your vagrant files, your gems, your Puppet scripts. There are a lot of new tools being used in these repositories, and you don't want those in the same level as your Drupal root, because that would allow them to be served up to anonymous users. So there's an exception here. If you use Pantheon as a hosting provider, they do require that the Drupal root and web root be at the same level. I actually accosted David Strauss at DrupalCon LA over this issue, and they're hearing us out, and so I think they might move in that direction eventually, and maybe no promises, but for now, when we use Pantheon, we want to use our custom DevOps tools. We have to do these awkward procedures with using Git subtree merges and things like that, which can often be difficult when you're trying to get a subcontractor to do for you on your behalf. So modules. The modules in the site are definitely central. What is their update status? Staying on top of the security updates is very important. The maintenance status. A lot of modules are not supported on Drupal, or versions or releases are not supported. So you want to be aware of these, and not supported modules will not receive security announcements. So also be aware of the release version. So any module that's not a full release, as in like a 1.0, does not receive security announcements. So that 1.0-alpha or 1.0-beta doesn't receive the full security announcements necessarily. So, and you have my sympathies if you ever used an unstable version of the media module. That's, I think, given a lot of people headaches, and I think this is an interesting statistic. These are the release usage statistics for the media module. That's kind of scary. A lot of people I know were using the unstable 7 release, which had a lot of issues around the WYSIWYG integration, and we've spent a lot of time just wrangling those issues with the media module on several projects. When and the benefit is that you get to use the cool features in Media 2.0. Yeah, the UI is great. It's much better than the 1.5 release, but be aware that you might be spinning your developers' wheels a bit on these newer features. The asset module is a great alternative to media and does have a full release, I think. I need to verify that. So these are important items to consider. So next section, general site configuration architecture. I've seen a lot of different approaches to building Drupal sites and how we engineer pages. Now, some people might disagree with me on this. Certainly, the block system had some major issues, especially in Drupal 6. I don't know if everyone realized this, but Drupal 6 and I think early versions Drupal 7 actually rendered all blocks placed anywhere on the site and then decided what to include on a page. So it spent all this time processing that was just wasted because we were rendering elements that weren't actually placed on the page. So context was a step up from blocks, but that had issues too when you scale to excuse me, to large complex sites. Looking through individual contexts where we have multiple contexts, I don't know, has anyone not used the context module here? Raise your hand. Everybody, great. So you know what I'm talking about. But you probably run into the problem of dealing with overlapping contexts. How do I manipulate the placement of this one block when multiple items are being inserted into the same region? Excuse me. Panels, I feel like was a step up from this. Panels is great. Excuse me for one moment. Because this gives you a unified view. One page, one layout. You place everything right through this centralized user interface. A lot of people are not fans of panels because it is a bit of a complex interface when you're not used to working with it. But after some experience, I have encountered your site maintainers or site admins who love it. So this might just take some basic training. Is configuration tracked? Everyone here has probably used features. So when we're talking about configuration management in Drupal, that usually means features. It's got like 250,000 installs. There's an alternative, the configuration management module. This is definitely a early release beta, which is going in a great direction, has a promise of decoupling this exported configuration with what's in the database, allowing you to change it. So, versus what features does is once you build a feature, you're kind of stuck with that feature unless you maybe use the features override module. But just exporting, making sure this configuration is exported is really helpful as a developer. It allows me to track what does get changed. So, I do encourage our clients and site admins to make the sites their own and make changes to the configuration if they so see fit. If something breaks, having it exported allows us to fix it very quickly. Or if nothing is, and we do need to make a change to that feature, just re-export it on the next update. It really doesn't take that much time. Just FUA, one command, export all features. And the file system. Oh no, I'm actually reading my next previous slide. Are the features cohesive? So they really, I feel it should be restricted to one feature per bundle type. Not some single monolithic site-wide feature. Just run into memory issues, and it'll just take you a long time to load and re-export. So that's generally helpful to export a single feature. So getting into the file system, make sure all your files are not just dumped in the same directory. I like to separate it by first field type, and then use some sort of token value. It doesn't have to be date, like I have. I don't even think those are the correct tokens, but it doesn't have to be date. Any sort of variable information that might change over time or by user, whatever's makes sense in your situation. But these Linux systems that we use, I've understand that they can slow down with like greater than 10,000 or so files in a single directory. Perhaps we have a Linux guru in the audience here that can verify that or not, or if I'm read that from a bad source. But there's also just the issue of our simple human comprehension of being able to work with such large directories is limited. So organizing your files directory is important, and also securing your sensitive files. So maybe your site takes job applications, resumes. People are uploading their personal data online, and those files get dumped in your site's default files directory. Well, that is publicly accessible, and Sure, you can make an argument that you have security through obscurity, but that's not good enough for me. So I highly suggest keeping these files in a secure area. And speaking of security, any site audit should definitely cover security review. And this spans, code configuration, hosting environment, everything. So, we talk about module updates. Yeah, stay up to date with those security releases. And if you are, you really need to define your own risk tolerance, because not every security announcement is critical. And here's a link to where those definitions are defined. So low criticality modules. It's often an issue where, yeah, maybe your site's administrator could add some cross-site scripting code into a privileged field. So definitely stay up to date with your security updates and define your own risk tolerances. Of course, that might be defined for you if you follow any sort of PCI or FSMA compliance. So sometimes your hands are tied with that. PHP fields, input modes. Not only is it a security issue, it's also really darn inconvenient to try and index a node with a Drupal goto statement in it. I think there was a Drupal.org article discussing the issue of goto statements in PHP fields and how to deal with them correctly. And for, I think, a couple years, it just didn't address the situation where you might be manually indexing those nodes in Solr through the interface. So that would cause the index process to just quit out on you because it would hit that goto statement and quit the batch process, and you might just be redirected to wherever it was redirecting you to. So, and this goes without saying, high access input formats, not just the PHP, but full HTML, restricted to privileged roles. And if your site uses any sort of open user registration, not using these is not an option. And I mean all of these: CAPTCHA, honeypot, Mollum, and somebody to filter what eventually does get through. Because even with these, I see about one or two spam accounts get registered. I once saw a database that was about 90% composed of user spam or spam user accounts because it was just left unprotected for a period of about 9 months, and that is just not a good place to be with your site. And also, even some legitimate, well-intentioned users aren't going to provide you with high-quality content. So I say that nicely, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So you want to protect yourself from these items. Also, make sure your hosting environment is up to date. There's a huge difference between hosting versus managed hosting. When the Bash shock and vulnerability came out last year, Forum 1, our system administration team, had already set up our sites to be controlled using SaltStack, and we were patched up against this within a couple hours of the release of that fix. So it's really helpful to have a trusted advisor team who is on top of the hosting environment. And development or staging instances are sufficiently protected against unauthorized access. I once saw a server get hacked because an abandoned dev site had an unpatched version of CKEditor. So a executable file was somehow uploaded, and they took control of the server. So you want to protect those from being indexed by Google, searchable, and have them just because the site was found through a Google search. So that's that level of obscurity certainly is helpful, but also just having an HTTP password in place is helpful too. How much time? Oh, yeah, time. Unused user SSH accounts discontinued. That's certainly a no-brainer. And use SSH instead of private public key authentication. That's going to be much more secure. protect yourself from, social engineering, hacking passwords, and the general web server best practices. Now, there's tons of options here, so I'm not going to get into these. There's plenty of resources out there that I've linked to. So covering the hosting environment, we talked about the difference between hosting versus managed hosting. So keeping your software packages up to date, and non-sysadmins may not realize that the PHP 5.3.3 that comes with a lot of these Red Hat systems is in fact supported by Red Hat. It's sure we'll probably be not using 5.3 for much longer, but security fixes are backported to those. So don't see 5.3.3 and automatically think it's insecure or out of date. And the PHP memory limit, we usually use 192 or so. That will certainly vary. Anything over 512 is a big indicator of a problem in the way a site is engineered. In fact, we had a client come to us sometime last year complaining their site was very slow. Well, they had to have their memory limit set to like 12 gigs, or else the site would crash. And that's because the vendor who had previously built the site ended up storing a lot of highly sensitive user data in the variables table. So these are good indicator or good red flags to pay attention to for perhaps poor decisions made in the way a site was architected. And APC, the default for APC is 64. Well, this will run a normal lean, out of the box Drupal site, but APC is your opcode cache, and larger sites you're going to need closer to 96 or even 128 for perhaps a more massive site. But APC can be used as the backend cache for Drupal. I advise against that because of its poor fragmentation. If it does run out of memory, it just empties it all out and starts again. So memcache is a better option than APC for that reason. Now I'm primarily a backend developer, but Audit is comprehensive, covering everything. So we can't not talk about the front end either. You want to make sure your CSS is well architected, avoiding duct tape themes. So this can result when developers over time try to theme an element, but they focus on theming this one element on this one page, rather than what does it mean to be a block, or maybe a block of a given type. So we see a lot of selectors targeting very specific views, just piled one on top of another. Another issue, if you're auditing a site, thinking about taking over support, you want to make sure you have access to the source SAS or less or whatever code used to compile that CSS, because that vendor may not have provided that with the project repository. Some don't. It's happened to me before. We actually had to track them down and have them send it over to us. And luckily, they still had it available. They didn't, get rid of that laptop that the project was on. So we lucked out there. Overuse of templates, I talked about includes before. Using a lot of templates can be a problem. Display Suite is a really powerful tool. You can accomplish a lot of arbitrary markup in it. So when you can do something through configuration instead of just hard coding it, I think is always a big one. And of course, we all know devoid logic in the theme layer. Oh wow, I'm running fast. So getting into process, so it's not just about how a site is constructed or configured or the hosting environment. How are you going to interact with your client? How are you going to deliver? What are you going to deliver to them? What is expected of you as a service provider? Are you just patching? Are you involved with working with strategy, defining the vision for the site? Are you actually performing those deployments? And if you aren't, I highly recommend that you at least know how those deployments are being conducted. In a previous job, actually, we were a subcontractor to a government agency who they were just unzipping the archive over the existing directory. So what happens when we move or delete a file? That doesn't make that change. That change does not carry over. At one point we thought it would be a good idea to, this was Drupal 6, so of course it wasn't automatically placing modules in a contrib or a custom directory, or not automatically custom, but it wasn't automatically placing modules in a contrib or whatever directory. So we had the idea to move the modules to this contrib directory just because we wanted to be a little more organized than having contrib and custom modules all in the same location. But when we made that change, since they were unzipping these archives right over the existing directory, those new locations of the modules just were never used. So as a result, when we updated those modules, those updates were never carried over because they're still using the old locations of those modules. Like I said, deployment requirements have to be on that slide. And as a service provider, conducting an audit is a great opportunity for you to discuss what other services you can provide. If you can do great analytics, UX design, or maybe you're really good at setting up Solar search, definitely have those on the table as recommendations or just ideas that come with estimates on what it would take to implement. So with that, looks like I'm a bit early. I think I spoke a little quickly here, so my apologies, but that leaves us plenty of time for questions or discussion. Maybe something I said on there was something you wholeheartedly disagree with, and I welcome those challenges and encourage that conversation. Yes?
With your spreadsheet and also with the different modules, do you tend to run them concurrently? Because you said you weren't sure if there were overlapping things that were being checked, or do you do one, fix everything, and go to the next one?
So you're talking about the question is when I have that spreadsheet and having overlapping modules.
Yeah.
But I think you're referring to the site audit and prod check,
yeah.
These things, right? I mean, process-wise, I jump back and forth between these reports a lot. So as I'm going through, I'd compile. Yeah, I run both, and then it's done. Then I have a lot of information ready to go for me to process into a memorandum that we then provide. So, yeah.
Well, that kind of set up my question about the deliverable that the client typically wants. You just mentioned the memorandum.
Mm-hmm.
You audit. What does the hiring manager, the responsible party, want in return? I mean, what does the memorandum look like? Do they expect you to sit down beside them?
Mm-hmm. So we usually conduct an audit as a precursor to beginning a support relationship for ongoing support, and an audit is what we do to start off that process. And the deliverable from an audit is a memorandum that goes through, discusses the highlights of what we found during the audit, issues that we've come across, and document those items individually, lay out our recommendations for how to resolve that technical debt, and as well as an estimate of what we think it would take to resolve that. So this is generally how this becomes that memorandum that we then hand over to the client, and that also is helpful for us for supporting the site, because now we have this documentation that we've developed that our own developers can refer to, because developers that didn't necessarily conduct the audit might be supporting the site. So having that in-house institutional knowledge documented is important.
The quick follow-up is, would you do a sit-down with them, or is that something that part of the support services that you charge
Would we sit down with them, or is that part of the support services?
You know, when you say when you're not, you sit down with them and go over stuff, or would you wait until you sign a support contract?
Well, it's usually charged as time and materials. Uh, so generally, it takes about 20 hours to do an audit for a single site, and so yes, that was something we charge for when we conduct an audit. And when that audit's completed, we sit down and meet with the client and go over what we found, and actually discuss these. And if they have any questions, we address them right there.
So you mentioned about APC cache versus memcache, right?
Mhm.
So I think in general, memcache and APC, they both deal with two different layers. Memcache more on the database caching versus APC on your code caching. So
Correct.
why do you say APC is?
So
memcache is
APC is an opcode cache,
Right.
and that's the way it's primarily used. It can be used as a back-end cache. There's the Drupal.org APC module, and this allows APC to be used as a back-end cache like the database or memcache. Yeah, I generally don't recommend using it for the performance reasons. I mean, yeah, APC, basic benchmarking can be up to 5 times faster than memcache, but because of these fragmentation issues, because when it does flush, it flushes everything. You have to rebuild that cache over again. We recommend memcache instead.
So you were referring to this module versus memcache.
Yeah. So yeah. APC. I mean, it's usually not, but it can be, and I've worked with sites that do use it as the back end cache instead of say the database or memcache. But it's also kind of a pain to work with as a developer because when you're using Drush to clear the cache, you have to pass the URI parameter every time or have it defined in your settings file, which I guess is not that difficult, but generally we recommend memcache for those reasons. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you use any Drush tools to help you do your audits?
So the site audit project is like a Drush extension, and it actually generates a report that looks like this. I had my command line up earlier. Oh no, wrong thing. That's going to block recording. Yeah, and that's just a Drush command. There we go, Drush AC HTML. Right there is how you can use that. Anyway, and like, were you curious about any other tools besides Site Audit? Yeah, I work with Drush all day, every day, so.
I do some auditing for focused on multilingual Drupal.
Mhm.
And I find I do a lot of Drush, like in against the database to find different things, or using PML to figure out what the enabled modules are, to see if there's any conflicts and problems.
Yeah, frequently I'm using Drush in those ways. Like if I do Drush PML, it will just shoot out all the modules installed and not installed on the site. But then I'll usually pipe that to grep to if I'm curious as to what version of views it's using, and I just want to quickly look at that instead of going through the modules page, or curious as to like whether or not a given module is installed. So yeah, if I do, I don't know how handy everybody is with the command line, but these are pretty simple usages for that. I don't know if that's new or exciting for you. Or,
Just curious if there's any, like I use the SQL queries to figure out
Yeah, yeah. Working directly with a database like that is very helpful. I can just do select count from node or nodes. Whatever. Oops. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, I love using MySQL in the command line. It's kind of fun, actually. Any other questions? All right. Well, if you think of anything afterwards, remember I did set up this hashtag What's in your audit. I checked no one else is using that, so I will be paying attention to that and address any of those questions offline. So with that, and I'll also be up by the Forum 1 booth right after this presentation or out in the hall if you want to chat one-on-one. So. Oh my gosh, it didn't record. All right, well, it is my promise to you to do this again offline, and I will post the recording.
I've had to do that a time or two.
And I won't cough during that one, so.
Thanks for the presentation.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah. Hey, do you use any tools for tracking while you're doing the audit?
So tracking time or
No,
tracking?
like the issues you find. Like I dump a lot of that stuff out of Drush to spreadsheets and stuff and catalog and Note, but
Yeah,
there's a better
I
way
just
to-
manually write in that spreadsheet. The document I linked to. Let me go here.
Yeah, because you had that spreadsheet of kind of like the checklist items. And
Yeah.
There's stuff underneath that.
Let me actually use that. Thanks for coming by. Let's see. Slides. These are slides. Checklist. Yeah, it's just a spreadsheet. It's
Okay.
really meant to be used. It's kind of a manual process. So,
Okay.
here's the item to check for, the analysis, sort of describing what its current state are, and then
Yep.
suggesting the course of action.
Okay.
And
similar
journaling,
to-
so.
Okay. Cool.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah, because when I'm doing a lot of the multilingual, so I'm more looking at content and
Mhm.
is your theme totally screwed up, and are you referencing right down to the und version of the node and
Mhm.
stuff like or fields.
Yeah, and I say to use the API earlier.
Yeah.
You aren't supposed to be accessing it through that. There's
Yeah.
like the field get value function that gives you what the field values are in that current language. So that's
Yeah,
it.
stuff like that. Yeah, cool.
Mhm.
All right, well, appreciate it.
Well, thanks for coming by.
Yeah. And hopefully, are you out of the DC office?
I'm out of the Alexandria office.
Alexandria. Okay.
Oh, the dongle? Yeah, that one's fine. Yeah. Sorry if you need it.
No, yeah. Make sure.
What are you presenting on?
This one, security. So
Oh, exciting.
You said some useful things I'm going to mention if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah. Please do. I highly encourage you to say my name and Form 1's name.
I will, I will.
Plug point, yeah.
Yeah, I got a plug.
Yeah, no, we, I guess just signed a partnership agreement with you guys
Oh, yeah?
recently. I'm with Lingotech, so.
Oh, yeah. I dropped by your booth at DrupalCon and
Oh, cool.
and got